We now come to the statement. Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm taking this statement on behalf of the Prime Minister. I spoke earlier today on the Prime Minister's record across the country, stabilising the economy, driving down waiting lists in the National Health Service, lifting 500,000 children out of poverty. But I want to start this statement, Mr. Speaker, by paying tribute to his record on foreign policy, which is second to none. As Foreign Secretary, when we entered government, I saw firsthand the Prime Minister rebuild our relationship across the world. The EU reset we led put Britain at the heart of Europe once again. Embracing President Zelensky on the steps of Downing Street on one of Ukraine's darkest days was symptomatic of the leadership he's shown across Europe and in relation to the threats from Vladimir Putin. Principled, courageous, and on the right side of history, he drove investment to working people with 5 trade deals in 2 years. And when it came to the most sober decision a Prime Minister has to make on a matter of life and death and war, when others were pushing for the UK to jump headfirst into another war in the Middle East, Keir Starmer stood strong, stood firm and said, no, this is not our war. Putting British soldiers and the national interest first, he made Britain safer, rebuilt Britain's reputation around the world and drove investment and growth that will support working families in Britain for decades to come. Regardless of your politics, Mr. Speaker, everyone in this House owes a debt of gratitude to the Prime Minister on foreign affairs. Mr. Speaker, I will turn now to the specifics of the G7 summit. Let me start with Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, once again, Russia chose to launch a huge attack on Ukraine on the eve of an international summit. In a show of their disdain for diplomacy, they killed innocent civilians in Kyiv and Kharkiv and hit the 11th century Pechesk Lvov, a sacred site at the very heart of Ukrainian culture. The G7 has a shared sense of outrage at Russia's conduct, but, Mr. Speaker, we also have a shared sense that this situation is changing too. Ukraine has a newfound momentum. They are increasingly able to push Russia back on the battlefield, and in Moscow, the mood is turning against the war. Almost 500,000 Russians have now lost their lives. Each month, they mobilise around 30,000 people, and each month they lose the same number on the battlefield with no progress to show for it. At the same time, the Russian economy is struggling and may already be in recession. And so we will seize this moment by continuing our military support, providing more air defence missiles and our biggest package of drones to date, financed with the profits of seized Russian assets. We're providing vital export finance to help rebuild Ukraine's energy system, and we're going further to increase the pressure on Russia's economy because we know the impact that this is having. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, announced 70 new sanctions at the summit, bringing the UK to around 500 sanctions on Russia this year alone, aimed at breaking up their military procurement supply chains, the illicit finance network they use to circumvent sanctions, and targeting, of course, the Russian shadow fleet. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the whole House will want to pay tribute to the Royal Marines, who interdicted a shadow fleet vessel in the Channel last week alongside officers from the National Crime Agency. Mr. Speaker, this is the moment to ramp up the pressure. President Zelensky is clear that he is ready to talk, but this must recognise the reality on the ground and Ukraine's newfound momentum. Any negotiations would need to be on the basis of the current line of control, not on Putin's unrealistic demand for territory that he's failed to win on the battlefield. And, Mr. Speaker, Russia should note the level of unity shown on this point and the G7's pledge of unwavering support for Ukraine. That will continue until we reach a just and lasting peace. Mr. Speaker, let me turn now to the Middle East. Getting to the deal between the United States and Iran has been bumpy, but it creates a moment of opportunity to bring down the cost of living for the British people and put the Middle East on a better path which is vital for global stability. We are now working to help implement this deal to ensure that the region doesn't go back to war and that the 60-day negotiation period ends in a longer-term settlement. Mr. Speaker, negotiations are the best way to secure our aims. One, that Iran is never allowed to have a nuclear weapon. Two, that they stop their attacks across the region. And three, that the Strait of Hormuz is reopened to shipping with no restrictions and no tolls. And that's why with President Macron, we have brought together an international coalition ready to help reassure shipping. We are in talks now about how to deploy this multilateral military mission in support of the deal and to explore immediate support for demining in the Strait. But, Mr. Speaker, we should also place this in the broadest possible context, recognising the need to make progress across the region. The extremely fragile ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon must be implemented in full. And I call on the Israeli government to show restraint to that end, including in its use of inflammatory language. The G7 agreed to work together in support of their process and strengthen the Lebanese government so that they can regain the monopoly on the use of force in the country. And, Mr. Speaker, on Palestine, I want to speak very frankly. Israel must stop blocking aid into Gaza. It must stop settlement expansion in the E1 area of East Jerusalem, which threatens the very viability of the two-state solution, and stop settler violence across the West Bank. We have a precious opportunity now to move on from the violence of the last 3 years in the interests of innocent people across the region. This should be our aim, bringing all our partners together in that effort. And, Mr. Speaker, significant progress was also made last week on migration, with a strong G7 statement outlining practical common steps on returns and sanctioning the criminal gangs. And with President Macron, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, took a big step in our bilateral cooperation, agreeing to extend the groundbreaking Sandhurst Agreement, which has already prevented more than 40,000 migrant crossings into the UK. Under this deal, new police units and riot squads will be deployed to French beaches to stop migrant boats before they take to the water. This is vital and important work. And, Mr. Speaker, it's because of steps like this and the approach of this government that we have removed 67,000 people with no right to be in our country. We've removed 9,000 foreign national offenders, and we're closing asylum hotels, and we're turning the tide on these issues after years of failure. Mr. Speaker, under the last government, net migration reached almost 1 million. We've reduced it by 82% in 2 years. UK immigration figures are the lowest today since 2012. Where they failed, Mr. Speaker, we are delivering. And, Mr. Speaker, the same is true on growth and investment. On the eve of the summit, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, welcomed the Prime Minister of Japan to Downing Street to deepen our strategic partnership after they met in Tokyo in January. It shows the value of building these bonds, Mr. Speaker, because they agreed more than £18 billion worth of investment into this country, creating tens of thousands of new jobs in infrastructure, offshore wind and financial services. That was followed at the summit itself with deals for a further £1.3 billion of investment from France and India into clean energy and AI, creating more than 13,000 new jobs in Manchester, in Leeds and in Birmingham. And with India's Prime Minister Modi, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agreed the entry into force of the UK-India Free Trade Agreement. This is the UK's quickest ever turning around from signing to entry into force, and it's one of the biggest deals either country has ever done. It will boost British GDP by £4.8 billion, boost real wages for British workers by £2.2 billion. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the House will note that tomorrow marks the 10th anniversary of the Brexit referendum. We know the world has changed fundamentally since 2016. We know that Brexit has damaged the economy, and so there's no doubt in our mind where the national interest lies today, and that it's closer cooperation with Europe. So the EU Commission, President Ursula von der Leyen, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agreed to intensify work deep on our economic ties, and we look forward to a further and forthcoming second UK-EU summit at the earliest opportunity. Mr. Speaker, unity on Ukraine to protect our collective security, unity on the Middle East to bring down the cost of living and bring back stability, progress on tackling illegal migration, driving down the numbers day after day, huge new investments into the UK, creating new opportunities and changing people's lives, real results for the British people. And, Mr. Speaker, at the same time, this government has brought down mortgage rates and inflation to help with the cost of living and help them fight the global forwards. We're supporting families with the summer savings package to spend time together this August, banning social media to keep our children safe, lifting 500,000 people out of poverty, boosting workers' rights and renters' rights, bringing down the NHS waiting list at the highest rate for 17 years. This government's focused on what really matters, serving the national interest, delivering for the British people, and I commend this statement to the House.
Can I just say the extra time was given because I thought we'd a lot more on G7. I didn't know it was going to be on home policy. Not to worry, me and the opposition came in bed. No.
Well, can I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement? And he is right, Mr. Speaker, when he says everyone in this House owes a debt to the Prime Minister, but it is most certainly not a debt of gratitude. It's the other type of debt that we owe. So the right honourable gentleman has come to the House to update us on a meeting he did not attend. He stood in for the Prime Minister at PMQs during the G7. Now he is standing in again to tell us what happened at the G7. Where is the Prime Minister? Where is the Prime Minister? He says he needs to stay in post for 3 months, but then doesn't come to Parliament to do his job. He wants to go on a farewell tour, while the new member for Makerfield is asking for a summer holiday to work out what he thinks. In the meantime, no one is in charge and Britain is not being governed. The Prime Minister gave assurances at the G7 about military support to Ukraine. He gave those assurances after the Defence Secretary resigned because he was being forced to make decisions that would increase the risk to our armed forces. The Prime Minister gave assurances about sanctions on Russian oil and gas, while here the government was lifting those sanctions. He is saying one thing abroad, Mr. Speaker, but doing the opposite at home. And these are just some of the many reasons he had to resign this morning, but apparently for some mysterious reason he must stick around until September. Given the Prime Minister has resigned, why is he hanging around? The Deputy Prime Minister had to change his statement so that we all knew that the EU Reset Summit has been postponed. That's not happening anymore. So what's he hanging around for? Why are we sending a non-Prime Minister to the most important NATO summit in a generation? Why? It is because this psychodrama is about the Labour Party, not the country. Labour are still trying to tell us that everything is fine. That's what the Deputy Prime Minister was saying. Everything is fine. He's given us a statement telling us about a G7 summit he did not go to. The few Labour MPs who bothered to turn up were nodding along, pretending to be listening intently, but in a few minutes they will all scurry back to their offices and focus on their real priority, lobbying for jobs in the next government. So can I take the opportunity to congratulate the Right Honourable Member for Makerfield on his election, Mr. Speaker, but can I just point out that the new member for Aberdeen South is here. He is here. The member for Makerfield is not here because he is more interested in his leadership bid than Britain's national security. 2 weeks ago, the Defence Secretary and Armed Forces Minister as well quit the government because Labour's failure to fund defence is putting our national security at risk. This will not disappear from the member for Makerfield's in trade just because he won a by-election. If he becomes Prime Minister, he will be briefed by the heads of our military about Britain's reducing ability to defend herself, let alone Ukraine, as the Deputy Prime Minister said. In order to fund defence, we need more money, not more speeches at summits. He will find that Britain is not able to borrow any more money. He will find that it has all been spent on welfare. He will realise that this government is providing export finance to rebuild Ukraine's energy system while crippling our own, reducing sanctions on Russian oil while sanctioning oil from Aberdeen. Only one thing matters at the G7 and NATO summits, Mr. Speaker, and that is our collective national security. The Minister is chuntering. Can he say anything about why the Defence Secretary resigned? If they're all living in la-la land, I'm going to wake them up. I'm going to wake them up to stop pretending that everything is fine, because it is not. Let me remind him, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister is resigning because he failed on national security. He appointed a known security risk as our ambassador to Washington. He is destroying our energy security, which is national security, and he is refusing to fund the defence investment plan needed to keep our country safe. The G7 summit reminds us, Mr. Speaker, that we are living in serious times, yet the government is paralysed and our country is in limbo. It is time for Labour to start putting country before party and to put Britain's national interest first.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is the first occasion I've been opposite the Leader of the Opposition.
Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy there delivering the G7 statement in place of the Prime Minister, which was underlined several times by the Conservative leader Kenny Badenoch. Our political correspondent Rob Powell was watching that along with me. And it started with... I don't know, I can't think of the words to describe it. Was it like a barnstorming?
Yeah, pretty heartfelt.
Heartfelt tribute to the Prime Minister. I mean, you know, we were watching it together and I turned round and said to you, well, why did the Labour MPs want him to go then?
Yeah, it was, I guess, because the statement's focused on foreign affairs. It was sort of a foreign affairs tribute to the Prime Minister. I suppose he talked about his work on the world stage, his work on Ukraine, him welcoming President Zelensky into number 10. I think after Zelensky had been having a difficult time with Donald Trump. Yeah. And I mean, I think that sort of section of Keir Starmer's career, his time as Prime Minister, perhaps will kind of be remembered as maybe the more successful part, if I want to kind of put it like that. I don't think he necessarily was the sort of first Prime Minister to kind of restore a sense of credibility for the UK on the world stage. Because I think actually that maybe begun under Rishi Sunak. You went through that sort of difficult period towards the end of Boris Johnson and then Liz Truss. And I think a lot of kind of world leaders were kind of looking on towards the UK and wondering what on earth was going on. You saw under Rishi Sunak kind of Brexit getting looked at again, that Windsor framework, relations with the EU being restored. And I think Keir Starmer has sort of picked that up and carried on with it, really. I guess the only caveat I'd put into that is whether the kind of aesthetics that he engaged in, whether the kind of sense of credibility was really backed up by like the money and the funding, I guess. Because the one thing we still haven't got, which think was brought up by Kemi Badenoch just there, is the Defence Investment Plan, the thing that John Healey resigned over, what was that, a week or so ago now. And so for as much as Keir Starmer was talking about things
and of course, the Leader of the Opposition would rip that all up. She talks about Russian oil. The party opposite is wrong about Russian oil. All sanctions on Russian oil remains in place. We're imposing new sanctions that's ever existed under the party opposite. I look forward to another opportunity to sit across from the Leader of the Opposition in the months ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I echo the Deputy Prime Minister's praise for the Prime Minister's success in restoring the UK's standing in the world, including with the EU. My right honourable friend has welcomed the G7 commitment to accelerating humanitarian efforts for Gaza and ending violence on the West Bank, and I and Putney residents will support him and the G7's efforts in this. Will he agree that Israel must stop the E1 Jerusalem and West Bank illegal expansion, and that the G7 must rebuild serious momentum behind the two-state solution?
David Lammy.
Well, very grateful to my honourable friend. Yes, yes, yes. And she will be pleased that this was an issue that was discussed at the G7 Leaders Summit, and I would encourage her to look at the statement that was put out, particularly in relation to peace in the Middle East.
Sir Ed Davey, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by recognising the courage it took for the Prime Minister to make his statement today? Politics can be brutal, but as we debate issues robustly in this chamber rightly, I think we can recognise that we're all human beings here and take account of that. But after years of this chaos, with multiple psychodramas and short-lived Prime Ministers under the Conservatives and now under Labour, the country is impatient for real change. It shows once again how broken our political system is, and that only by fixing that can we finally end this chaos and instability. Mr. Speaker, there will be another moment to reflect properly, but can I now simply thank the Prime Minister for his service? Turning to the statement, progress on more support for our brave Ukrainian allies is indeed welcome, and the Deputy Prime Minister knows he has cross-party support for that. But at the G7, did the government raise the proposal of using frozen Russian assets around the world to support Ukraine? And if this was not raised, why not? Meanwhile, Donald Trump is boasting about his ceasefire with Iran, but the art of the deal, this is not. Here's Netanyahu's idiotic war, backed by the Conservatives and Reform, has achieved absolutely nothing. It's wrought havoc on the global economy and on our economy, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, and the Prime Minister was right to keep us out of that war. But given how Netanyahu seems determined to undermine any ceasefire, what discussions did the Prime Minister have with allies at the G7 to bring real pressure on both him and Hezbollah to end the fighting? Mr. Speaker, all this shows how important it is for Britain to strengthen our defences and to deepen our partnership with dependable allies, especially our neighbours in Europe. So will the Prime Minister confirm whether or not the Defence Investment Plan will be published before the NATO summit? We think on these benches that is vital so we can start repairing the damage done by Conservative defence cuts, and at the NATO summit have real leverage and influence. So can the Deputy Prime Minister tell us, will the Defence Investment Plan go to the Right Honourable Member for Makerfield for his urgent sign-off? Finally, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister had promised a crucial summit with the EU next month to start repairing the damage done by that party. Now, reports say that this has been postponed because of the Prime Minister's resignation. Does the Deputy Prime Minister agree that this is a disaster? Fixing our relationship with Europe is far too urgent for these discussions to be postponed yet again. So can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister to urge the Right Honourable Member for Makerfield to reject the government's current timid reset and instead push for our growth and defence partnership, including single market membership, free from the out-of-date red lines the current Prime Minister imposed 5 years ago?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Very grateful to the honourable gentleman for the manner in which he put his remarks and for his tribute to the Prime Minister for his public service. And of course I will relay that to the Prime Minister when I see him later today. He raises Ukraine, and I'm pleased to confirm that I hope to go to the Ukraine Recovery Conference later this week to continue to discuss these issues. And he's right to raise the issue of frozen Russian assets. That remains a long-standing item across G7 nations. He recognises that there are European countries who are more exposed than others, and I hope that we can break the deadlock soon. He raises, of course, the deal in the Strait of Hormuz. It's a fragile deal, and of course, the continued bombardment of Lebanon and affecting the fragile ceasefire that is holding as of this morning in relation to Lebanon particularly pertains to that, and we call on restraint from Israel particularly. It is important that we maintain peace across the region at this time. And yes, of course, I can confirm that the Defence Investment Plan will be published before the NATO summit, and I think it is important that the Prime Minister is in post for that NATO summit. And can I also say that I hope that the EU summit, he will recall that I was the first Foreign Secretary to return to the top table of Foreign Secretaries in Europe, that the summit with the EU will come forward as soon as possible.
James Ash.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank the Deputy Prime Minister for his update on a range of issues from the G7 summit. I wonder if he could set out how the government's work to de-escalate things in the Middle East will help families here in Britain and my constituency of Rushcliffe, specifically around protecting shipping routes, reducing energy pressures and keeping prices down.
Well, very grateful to honourable friend, and can I pay tribute to the work of the Foreign Secretary in that regard, and of course the Prime Minister and our National Security Advisor in their determination to seek to keep the Straits of Hormuz open, to work with partners and bring together a coalition to achieve that. We stand ready to help, particularly with demining. We all want to give the reassurance to industry to get back to freedom of travel down the Strait of Hormuz. All of that will affect cost of living in this country and stabilise our economy, but also the global economy.
Sir Oliver Dowden.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Deputy Prime Minister share my concern and that of many of my constituents about elements of the Iran deal, and in particular that the sanctions relief, the early sanctions relief, the access to frozen Iranian assets and the $300 billion of economic reconstruction and development aid could find its way back to the IRGC, further strengthening an organisation that has done so much damage to regional stability and indeed global stability, both directly and through its proxies. And while I'm at it, will the Deputy Prime Minister sit down with the police and find some way of stopping this ridiculous heckling and disruption of Prime Ministers on the steps of Downing Street when they're trying to make statements which further adds to our considerable international embarrassment right now?
Prime Minister.
Well, very grateful to the right honourable gentleman, and we have sanctioned the entirety of the IRGC. We've imposed 240 sanctions on Iran since coming into office. And we will bring forward legislation to implement full and further sanctions and sectorial measures, including targeting finance, energy, software and other industries advancing Iranian nuclear escalation. And he has stood in my shoes on the steps of Downing Street. And I do think there are these moments where the country are watching in and they do want to be able to hear Prime Ministers of the day speak. So I recognise the points that he raised.
Thank
you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I was glad that the Deputy Prime Minister reiterated support for Ukraine, but in order to do that, we obviously need the defence investment plan. But could he perhaps explain what conversations the Prime Minister had with the G7 about defence investment through particularly the Defence Security and Resilience Bank and the multilateral defence mechanism? Both could be important to Britain, and I wonder if the Deputy Prime Minister can tell us what's happening.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend, and she will be reassured that, of course, defence and increased defence spending across the G7 was a topic of discussion. We support attempts by the European Union and indeed by our Canadian friends to ensure that the funds are available and different mechanisms are available to increase that defence spending. And as I've said, we will set out how we will do that before the NATO summit.
For the message, Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister made reference to the meeting that the Deputy Prime Minister made reference to the meeting that the Prime Minister had with Sanai Takaichi, the Prime Minister of Japan, with reference to 18 billion of investment coming into the country. Some of that will no doubt be with regards to the Global Combat Air Programme. That is something that a funding deal needs to be in place for the end of this month, so next week. The Minister for Defence Readiness and Procurement mentioned last week that funding deal has been agreed. Could the Deputy Prime Minister confirm how much that deal is worth and whether that is a multi-year deal or whether there is a 3-month interim deal that runs out at the end of September?
Deputy Prime
Minister.
I'm
very grateful to the honourable gentleman, and indeed I recall being in Japan as Foreign Secretary and discussing that deal, and I was very pleased to see the 18 billion deal, which will create incidentally 11,000 jobs signed up. I will ask the Defence Secretary to update the honourable gentleman in the usual way.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After decades of previous Conservative governments who preached isolation on the international stage, both the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister have shown through the work they've done at the GC the value of being in the room to get agreements that make changes that are positive for our national interest. That is why he will understand the concern that many of us have today that the EU summit planned for the 22nd of July to make progress on repairing the damage done by Brexit to our economy and agreeing things like an SPS deal and youth mobility has been delayed. He will understand every month of delay in the summit is a month of delay in implementation of any deal. So what can he do to reassure those of us who recognise the salvage operation we need to address the damage Brexit has done to our economy, that this is a pause, not a stop in that process?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, very grateful to my honourable friend for her leadership on these issues. Can I reassure her that the summit will take place as soon as possible, and also that we are having ongoing discussions with the European Union on SPS, youth mobility, steel and a range of issues on a day-to-day basis.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A week ago, the Prime Minister said that the UK would support the deal between the United States and Iran by standing up a, quote, defensive, independent, multilateral mission. And at the planning stage, that was designed to restore freedom of navigation to the Strait of Hormuz. In May, the UK was supposed to deploy drones, Typhoon fighter jets and HMS Dragon to such a future mission, whereas today the Deputy Prime Minister said it was immediate support for demining. What will the deployment involve and what might trigger it, please?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman. Of course, HMS Dragon to be ready for any mission to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Of course, advanced British military mine clearance specialists, as I referred to, Typhoon's ready to conduct air patrols over the Strait, and the Royal Navy's modular Beehive system, which can deliver high-speed, autonomous Kraken drone boats to track and identify potential threats and defeat them.
Shonara Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can I also associate myself? Mr. Speaker, I'm so sorry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I also associate myself with my right honourable friend's remarks about the Prime Minister and his service to our country? Mr. Speaker, despite the agreement with Iran, as the Deputy Prime Minister highlighted, the attacks on Lebanon have continued. Can he say more about what will be done to ensure that the truce is sustainable, that has been agreed? And can he say more about what action will be taken to support people who've been displaced, over 1 million people, and for the reconstruction of that country?
Thank you. Deputy Prime Minister.
To my honourable friend, we strongly welcome the ceasefire, but recognise that it's fragile. It must be fully implemented, including withdrawal by the IDF from Lebanon and deployment of the Lebanese armed forces from the south. And Hezbollah must end its indiscriminate rocket fire. We've announced an additional £20 million worth of humanitarian funding, taking UK support up to £30 million. And Baroness Chapman, the Honourable Minister, was in Lebanon last week discussing these issues, of course, with our French counterparts and the Lebanese government.
Sir Alec Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And may I say to the Deputy Prime Minister, I really am quite impressed that he knows more about defence spending than the former Secretary of State for Defence. He was able to stand at Deputy Prime Minister's questions and also know what was going on in the G7, and apparently the Prime Minister did such an amazing job that then the way forward is to sack him. So may I just ask the Deputy Prime Minister, if the demands to go into more closer trading relationships with Europe are to be met by some of those who are pushing in his party, and indeed what the Honourable Member for Makerfield had said recently, do those 5 trade deals that he's boasted about stand up?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. We've been very clear about our red lines, the red lines we had in the manifesto, and delivering on our promise to reset our relationship and put Britain at the heart of Europe. And absolutely, we stand by the ability to implement, enact and see our economy grow as a result of those 5 trade deals, all of which I've been involved in.
McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too want to echo the tribute that he's paid to the Prime Minister. He has much of which he can be proud, particularly on the international stage. I welcome the Deputy Prime Minister's strong words about what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. But my constituents frequently write to me in despair that Israel does seem to be able to act with impunity whether it comes to illegal settlements or the blocking of aid, many other examples. What reassurance he can give them that there is some hope that Israel will be held to account and the people of Gaza and West Bank will be helped in the face of such oppression?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Very grateful to my honourable friend. I'm proud, of course, that we took historic steps to recognise a Palestinian state. We oppose settlements that undermine a 2-state solution. Settlements are illegal under international law, and we urge Israel, as I've continued to do, to take greater action to hold violent settlers to account and strongly condemn the massive increase that we're seeing in settler violence against Palestinian civilians. That's why my honourable offence announced further sanctions against those who are sustaining that violence, the 4th package in recent times.
Robert Jenrick.
The Deputy Prime Minister just said that we're all in the Prime Minister's debt. Well, that would be the £300 billion of debt that he's racked up. And of all the G7 countries, we now pay the highest borrowing costs. So given that Labour were elected on an express pledge not to raise taxes and not to borrow beyond our means, would the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that if the member for Makerfield wants to hike taxes even more and to max out our national credit card, he should call a general election?
I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman, but I've got to say to him, Reform are in no position to ask questions or make demands when their leader is refusing to own up about his £5 million donation and whether he lobbied the Bank of England about cryptocurrencies.
Davey. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I also share the Deputy Prime Minister's remarks about the Prime Minister and his service to our country. Does my right honourable friend agree that Israel must allow aid into Gaza, stop settlement expansion in the E1 area of East Jerusalem and tackle settlement violence, and that the G7 must use this moment to ensure Palestinian people have the resources they need to rebuild their country?
Well, very grateful to my honourable friend, and she's absolutely right. We all now want to see peace maintained in the Middle East. We look with horror at what we see on the West Bank and the settler violence that we see, and I condemn the inflammatory language that we're seeing once again by members of the Israeli government.
Craig Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Deputy Prime Minister was right to say that Iran must never be allowed to get a nuclear weapon. But we know history teaches us that the Iranian regime have ignored the deal that was in place, the JCPOA. So can the Deputy Prime Minister be clear with the House what the government is doing in clear terms to make any future deal actually meaningful and stop the Iranian regime acquiring the level of enriched uranium that would make a nuclear weapon?
Well, I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman. I stood at this dispatch box and discussed these issues now over several years. I remember negotiating with the Iranians in Geneva, and I have to say some of the mendacity that I heard with them in relation to their nuclear ambitions. We, of course, as the G7, and it's very pleased to see the statement, and I refer him to that if he hasn't already read it, in relation to Iran. And as you would expect, the United Kingdom stands ready to support that deal and hold Iran to the obligations that they must necessarily make in relation to their nuclear ambitions and Iranian enrichment.
Grace.
Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to join the Deputy Prime Minister in paying tribute to the exceptional work of both the National Crime Agency and the Royal Marines, who have a very special bond with Exeter being housed at Lympstone, just down the River Exe. Again, in that action taking on the Russian shadow fleet. Can the Deputy Prime Minister commit to the government and this country taking further action against the Russian shadow fleet and making sure that we continue to be at the forefront of enforcing the sanctions that we put in place?
David Lammy.
Well, I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman. Let me thank again the Royal Marines and the National Crime Agency officers for their bravery and professionalism. The vessel is now held off the south coast at a UK anchorage. It's a live criminal investigation and ongoing, so obviously I cannot comment further, but he's heard us talk again and again about the Russian sanction fleet and corral much of the international community to act.
Pete Wishart.
Much, Madam Deputy Speaker. But the only thing of note and real consequence in the statement is the Deputy Prime Minister reminding us that tomorrow is 10 years since the disastrous decision to leave the EU, a Brexit that Scotland overwhelmingly rejected, but has left us the most impacted nation in the UK and a bill of £30 billion. But does he agree it's not just us, but it looks like the whole UK has suffered because of Brexit, made it virtually ungovernable as we're now about to get our 7th Prime Minister in the Brexit 10-year era?
David Lammy.
Well, he's right. The leader of the opposition and her party delivered a botched Brexit, and we must hold them to account for that. And that's why we've sought, day after day, to reconnect with our European friends, to partner with them where we can. We held the first summit. I look forward to the next summit when it comes, and all of the progress that we've made to repair the damage that was done and to make progress with our European friends together.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week at Prime Minister's Questions, I raised a very serious topic around the impact of steel tariffs and the impact on companies and jobs across the country. The Deputy Prime Minister gave me a rather evasive answer, I suspect because he didn't expect to be stood here today addressing the House of Commons. He did say that the Prime Minister would be raising this at the G7, so can he give the House an update on what was discussed with regard to steel tariffs, and perhaps take the opportunity to once again try and answer the question, what steps is the government taking to avoid this economic disaster that will occur in less than 2 weeks?
Grateful to the honourable gentleman. Protecting primary steel production critical to the UK national infrastructure is, of course, the #1 priority. Overall quota levels for steel imports will be reduced by 60% compared to current arrangements from the 1st of July, with steel coming into the UK above those levels subject to 50% tariff. Measures are targeted at steel that are made or could be made in the United Kingdom. We continue to engage with the industry and trading partners on our steel measures, and we will confirm final quotas shortly ahead of the 1st of July. We'll monitor the impact of this closely, including a review after 12 months.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Around the Pilabara, than 10 years on, and Brexit has cost the Welsh economy £4 billion. It's raised the cost of living and it's narrowed the life chances of young people. So if the next Labour government is serious about change for the better, then rebuilding relationships with European members of the G7 and the EU must be front and centre. Given that the Brexit Reset Summit due to be held a month from now has now been postponed with no date, surely the definition of stability would be for the next government to campaign to rejoin the single market and the customs union and to be upfront and forthright with the British people of the advantages of doing so.
Well, grateful to the Honourable Lady, and she and I have discussed these issues indeed before we came into government. There's no change to our manifesto red lines, and I'm not going to preempt what our next manifesto might say, but I do look forward to the next EU summit, and I'm quite sure that that will take place as soon as is possible.
Mark Pritchard.
Madam Speaker, can I say to the Deputy Prime Minister that he's looking even more Prime Ministerial than he did on Wednesday? I wonder what has changed since last Wednesday and today. And can I say that this is an end of an era? Because the love-in between the Deputy Prime Minister and myself could be coming to an end, and he may not be at the dispatch box much longer, but I hope that is not the case. Is it not clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that Paris is not a place for British Prime Ministers? Because when Margaret Thatcher went to Paris to a security conference in 1990, she had gone within 4 days as Prime Minister. Sir Keir Starmer, as Prime Minister, has gone within 5 days after visiting Paris for a security conference. But on the communique from the G7 statement, there's a reference to Ukraine and energy. Can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister when the UK will end its temporary licences for the import of Russian diesel and jet fuel through third countries? It's scheduled to end in 2027. Could he bring that date forward?
David Lammy.
Very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for his question. I expect to be here for a few days yet. And can I say to him that we did publish a statement on that issue, and it's the 1st of July. 1st of January.
Monica Harding. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've been waiting for the EU-UK reset for 2 years, and today we have just more warm words in the absence of the UK-EU Reset Summit, postponed because the Labour Party has decided to change its leader. So on the anniversary of the Brexit referendum, when we are all poorer and our economy has taken a 6 to 8% hit because of it, what assurance can the Deputy Prime Minister give this House that the next Prime Minister will be bolder than this one and will actually positively reset the relationship with Europe, supporting our calls for joining the customs union and the single market?
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady. I'm proud of the work that we've done to reconnect with the European Union, and alongside the Cabinet Minister and my dear friend on the front bench, we put a lot of work into the run-up for that EU summit. I was pleased to sit around the table with foreign secretaries across Europe for the first time, and that momentum will continue, not just for the next year, but right up to the general election in many years ahead.
Harriet Cross.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Deputy Prime Minister mentioned in his statement an £18 billion investment from Japan. What he didn't mention was earlier this year the government turned down a £17.5 billion investment from oil and gas companies when they decided not to end the energy profits levy. He also mentioned Russian sanctions, but what he didn't mention was that they have not sanctioned Russian-derived oil products nor Russian LNG. Can the Deputy Prime Minister not see that this government's policies on the North Sea oil and gas sector are bad for national security, and that whoever is leading the government next must end the ban on new licences, end the EPL and get Jackdaw and Rosebank permitted?
David Lammy.
Well, can I just remind the Honourable Lady that in the past decade, 70,000 jobs were lost in the North Sea because of the party that she is parted with, headquartered, Great British Energy in Aberdeen, We've established the Office for Clean Energy Jobs to help create jobs. There are only 105,000 jobs in renewables in Scotland. We're committed to jobs, and that's why we provided an extra £1.2 billion in support to upskill the workforce.
Ellie Chan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The G7 summit took place in a country in the grip of an extreme heatwave, a heatwave that's now hitting the UK this week. And yet, climate change was not on the agenda, despite the fact that the climate crisis has huge impacts on human health and economic security. Why is it that the G7 is asleep at the wheel with their heads buried in the sand? Could it be possibly that they were appeasing one Donald J. Trump? And have we not already learned that appeasing Trump never works? Will the Deputy Prime Minister assure me that under whoever the next Prime Minister is, the UK will show the leadership needed here in the UK and on the global stage to tackle the climate crisis?
David Lammy.
Well, it's great to hear the Greens talking about climate again. Frankly, more. I'm very proud of our record on climate, on renewables, on nature. I was very pleased to deliver my Q lecture on this subject and what the work that continues, not just in the Department for Energy and Security, but also the FCDO, where great work is going to ensure that Britain once again is at the leadership table on climate and nature.
Lincoln Job.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is a joke, right, Madam Deputy Speaker? We've got the Deputy Prime Minister here telling us a statement about a G7 summit that he wasn't at. Yeah. I'm embarrassed to point that out in front of the public gallery in the world. Does the can the Deputy Prime Minister name a single Prime Minister who has gone to a G7, a G8 or a G20 and not come back personally to make a statement to this House?
Yeah. David Lammy.
Despite the repartee, the honourable gentleman is well aware that in our constitutional situation, just as I deputised for the Prime Minister at Prime Minister's Questions last week and asked his questions on behalf of a range of issues on behalf of the government, I deputised today to update the House on the G7.
Jess Brown-Fuller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For every tear of an Israeli mother, 1,000 Lebanese mothers must weep. All of Lebanon must burn. These are the appalling words of the Israeli Minister for National Security, Ben-Gvir, posted 3 days ago. I know that the Deputy Prime Minister will stand up and condemn this genocidal and frankly psychopathic language. Considering the very fragile ceasefire with Lebanon, does the Prime Minister see any version, the Deputy Prime Minister, see any version of lasting peace in the Middle East with Ben-Gvir continuing to serve in Netanyahu's cabinet, and are further sanctions on him possible?
David Lammy.
Well, his words are reprehensible, and of course I condemn them, and I was very proud to sanction him, frankly, for all that he continues to do to destabilise the Middle East and undermine the prospects of a two-state solution.
Dr. Al Pinkerton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government lauded the EU-UK reset deal as potentially delivering a modest but yet nonetheless material 0.2% uplift to GDP per annum. That equates to about £6 billion per year, or £500 million per month. Given that the EU have announced the delay to that summit, does the Deputy Prime Minister consider £500 million to be a price too high, a price too low, or about right for the latest palace coup within the Labour Party?
David Lammy.
Well, I've got to say to the honourable gentleman that I expect that the EU summit will happen as quickly as possible. He knows our constitutional arrangements. Andy Burnham won a massive victory in Makerfield, and I look forward. I look forward to working with him over the coming weeks and months.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There are massive death tolls in the wars in Ukraine, Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Lebanon, Palestine, Iran. Last year, global arms expenditure reached $2.7 trillion, a third of which came from the USA, This year it will be well over 3 trillion. What consideration did the G7 give to the direction in which the world is going? Greater global poverty, greater inequality, greater climate injustice, greater danger for the whole world. Did they have any thoughts about an idea of greater diplomacy, of ending the wars, of bringing about peace around the world, or is it all about solely spending more and more money on weapons?
David Lammy.
I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman. And look, the G7 was a great act of diplomacy, and I commend President Macron for a successful G7. And I think it was successful in relation to the terrible geopolitical environment that, of course, he describes, in part because he chose to invite India, Kenya, partners in the Gulf and others to talk about the very same issues that I know has dominated much of his career.
Danny Kruger.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government wants to align more closely with the EU 10 years on from the Brexit referendum, but does the Deputy Prime Minister recognise as a statement of fact that the sectors where the growth of the future is coming from, life sciences, agri-tech, defence tech and most of all AI, in these sectors the UK far outstrips the EU and would not do so if we had spent the last 5 years in the regulatory regime of the EU. And so whenever the EU summit happens, does the Deputy Prime Minister agree that we need to maintain absolute sovereignty and indeed regulatory divergence in these vital areas?
David Lammy.
I think we must always do what's right for the country. I don't quite recognise the either or that he is positing. Of course, we are global leaders in areas like AI, digital and tech. But I do think with the EU as our biggest trading partner, it's vital that we continue to work in partnership with them. And I'm very proud of the record of the government in relation to that.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for the statement this afternoon. I will allow a few moments for the front benches to swap over.